Thank you. All right, everybody, welcome to the City Commission, the workshop for May 10th, 2022. We'll call this meeting to order. Val, please call the roll.
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Mayor Villa?
Here. Thank you very much, Val. Mr. Forte, I'll turn this over to you to talk about the containers ordinance.
Well, where'd Brian go?
Did he walk out? Actually,
We're going to start out right away with Brian, the city planner, doing a presentation on the container ordinance. And just as a lead-in, we haven't really gotten complaints about these containers, other than staff is noticing that for whatever reason, there seems to be more and more of them coming available that we see throughout the city. And Brian will explain to you how these things are really kind of an accessory structure, and they should be treated like an accessory structure. But there just seems to be more and more of them popping up now. At one point, they were rather cost-effective for people to buy and put on their property. So we're, like I said, we haven't necessarily gotten complaints, but we're just noticing that more and more are coming into the city, and we need to address it. I think South Daytona banned them completely.
Not completely.
But off of
They
US 1.
are allowed only in a specific zoning district, which is a heavy business.
On the industrial. You can go ahead and get started.
We're going to just basically make a presentation.
Yeah.
thank you, Brian. The floor is yours. We just started the meeting, so you're not...
Okay. So currently, and what I'll do is I'll just, in a sense, make the presentation that I would if this were coming to you for a decision. So our land development regulations right now don't specifically say that you can or that you cannot have a steel shipping container on your property. And we're talking about the style of those that are commonly seen on trains, and you might see them on ships or on large trucks. And the city has received requests to place these containers on both residential and business properties to use for permanent storage use. And there have been just a few complaints, not many, but the request to use them for permanent storage is increasing. So in looking at this, it's staff's opinion that the use of these containers is a temporary one. They're delivered to a site, loaded up with goods, put on a ship or a train, an 18-wheeler usually, get to where they're going, and then they're unloaded and then used for the same purpose again. They've never really been designed to be placed permanently on sites. They're built well for what they do, but because they are simply used for storage purposes during freight, they're not aesthetically pleasing. They're really industrial in nature. So the containers, staff feels, if left unregulated, could become an issue and really detract from the visually appealing type of city that we're trying to realize. So because the city's code doesn't really provide any specific guidance on shipping containers or even define what they are, staff worked to develop an ordinance that defines the term and addresses where they can and cannot be placed within the city. So one of the things that staff did was reach out to other jurisdictions within Volusia County to get an idea of how these containers are treated in those areas. And in general, they're permitted only as permanent structures in industrial settings or in heavy commercial areas. There is a proposed definition which says that a shipping container, also known as an intermodal container, it's a reusable container that is originally, specifically, or formally designed for or used in the packing, shipping, movement, or transportation of freight, articles, goods, or commodities, and is also designed or capable of being mounted or moved on a rail car, truck, trailer, or loaded on a ship for intermodal freight transport. And then specifically, I added that such a container is not a storage shed. So there is an Exhibit A that shows what type of a container this ordinance addresses. And one of the things that the ordinance proposes is to restrict the use of shipping containers for permanent storage use in only in the areas of CC1 Commercial Corridor, I-1, which is the Wholesale Light Industrial District, and I-2, which is a heavy zoning district, or the heavier industrial district, in only those three districts. Permanent use would mean more than 14 days within a calendar year, except that those containers could be placed on active construction sites for more than 14 days within a calendar year, and they would not be considered permanent storage under those conditions. The use of the shipping containers for permanent storage would be prohibited in all other straight zoning districts. I say straight zoning districts because if a person came in and wanted to do a planned development, that's something that could be discussed. They would also be prohibited on any properties within the CRA or our redevelopment district that touch Ridgewood Avenue or on LPGA Avenue, on properties that touch LPGA Avenue. The CC1 Commercial Corridor District and the I-1 and I-2 industrial districts, these were selected as being the most appropriate zoning districts to permit shipping containers because, in general, their purpose and use is more intense than the other zoning districts that we have in the city. The proposed ordinance would also require that the containers be placed behind the front plane of the principal structure, basically in back of the structure, it wouldn't be able to be in front of the structure, and not be located within the principal rear or side yard setbacks, except that such containers that have a footprint of less than 250 square feet would be allowed to be placed within 8 feet of the rear property line. If the container is at all visible from public rights-of-way, it's proposed that it would have to be placed in an 8-foot or behind an 8-foot high masonry block enclosure or wall with a stucco finish painted to match the color of the principal structure. And this is really, in a sense, similar to what we do with a dumpster. Dumpsters are really metal containers, and we require them to be enclosed so that they're not visible from rights-of-way. Also, to protect the health and safety of the public, it's proposed that the shipping containers not be permitted as living quarters or workspace, so there wouldn't be able to be any plumbing, electrical, or air conditioning put within them, and this would ensure that they not be occupied. The material within these containers would need to be approved or would be subject to approval by either the fire marshal or the chief building official or the fire chief. Now, with regard to who this would apply to, these regulations would not apply to a city-approved planned development wherein such containers are used to construct unique offices, homes, or restaurants that meet all the requirements of the Florida Building Code, as well as other applicable city, state, and federal regulations. An example of this is attached, and you would see that there are sometimes developments or, do we have that in?
Yeah.
Can we just put that up so they can see what it's not applying to? So that's an example of what
The
we
other
are
picture.
talking about.
The one below it, right?
And then there's another
There's
one.
another picture in there.
Yeah, and then there's
There's one
one
too, I
more.
see.
There's another picture of like the development.
So these are container
Oh, I saw that.
type developments that this does not apply to. So if someone came in and wanted to do something like this, this is something that would come before you as a planned development, and you as a commission would make a decision.
Yeah, a long time ago.
So Brian, in lieu of a planned development, could, we have construction definitions, frame, masonry. is this an allowable use currently
As a building material?
as a building material?
It would be if it met all of the requirements, the federal and state requirements and the requirements of the Florida Building Code. Then it could be used as building material. And that's really what this is. In these circumstances, it's used as a building material.
But would this be different than, say, those tiny homes that we see on TV?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the question then comes up, okay, if you as a commission decide to pass this, who is it going to apply to? How is it going to apply? So, shipping containers, right now it's proposed, that have not, or that have received a permit on any property prior to the adoption date of the ordinance can remain on the property. And they can be moved in order to make them less visible from rights-of-way. So if they've got a permit, for example, one of the latest that comes to mind is the building by Matt Schwarman on 6th that he recently purchased. He has a shipping container there that has been permitted, so he would be fine, and folks like him would be fine who already have these types of structures permitted. Shipping containers that are not associated with an active construction site and that do not have a permit, but that have been on a property continuously for at least 1 year prior to the adoption of this ordinance, could also remain on the property, but they would need to come in and receive a permit.
Brian, can I stop you a second?
Yes.
How are we going to accept or approve the year that it's been there?
If they were to say, let's say they showed that they purchased it, an invoice
Yeah.
or proof that they purchased it a year
So we're going
ago.
to require proof that they have had it for a year.
Or it might be common knowledge. For example, everyone knows that Heavenly Cheesecake has had hers
So
for
if
years.
you know for a fact that
Right.
they've had it for that long,
Right.
that's good, or they need to provide proof that they've had it that long.
Right,
The
we
other
also, I'm sorry, sir.
The other alternative is through Eagle View, we have the ability to go
Okay.
back and look at a certain, now
Okay.
it's not going to be scientific because we don't
Right,
know
right.
what day it was, but we'll have an idea if it was there.
I just didn't know if we already knew what we could do, and so it sounds like that's well under control.
Yeah, we have that, as the city manager mentioned, we also have Google Earth, there are different ways.
Okay.
But, you know, if someone has one and you were to say, hey, I know this person, it's been there for years, and that's fine. If it's common knowledge that it's
Okay.
been there. So the city, though, would have the right to require that the container be moved to a less visible area if it's causing issues, or to meet setbacks or screening requirements. All other non-permitted shipping containers in the city would have to be removed. These are folks who just simply put them on their property, never got any permits, never came in, and right now it would be required to have a permit. So if they didn't have one and they didn't meet these requirements, then they would need to be removed. So in general, that's the proposal for the shipping containers that
So-
would come before you.
When you said, like, somebody gets to put their lawn equipment in and it's on the side of the yard, that's not going to work.
If it's not permitted, and it has not been there for at least a year. Now, even if it's been there for a year, they would need to come in and get a permit. They wouldn't necessarily be required to get rid of it. But if they said, look, I've had this for a year, and let's say it's on a property that doesn't meet one of the districts that we're asking that it be restricted to right now. Let's say it's on a B3 business district, which is a much less intense
Or residential.
use. Or even residential. Now, that's something that, you as a commission, if you were to say no, if it's unpermitted and it's on residential, it needs to go, but if you
I seem
want
to
to.
remember something on Center Avenue or something. We had an issue a
Yeah.
while back.
In 2017, there was a residential property
They're gone.
that this commission
Well, I'm just saying,
had the
yeah.
guy removed. It was construction-type stuff. So, and that leads me to the question that I wanted to ask is, so how were we able to have that removed if it wasn't necessarily already in our code that you couldn't have it? Was it just because it wasn't spelled out that you could have it? Is that how we
Right,
removed
our
that?
code is called an inclusive code,
Okay,
which basically says if it doesn't specifically say you can have it,
then it's
you can't.
excluded.
So I just want to ask Brian, procedurally, does this have to go to the BOPA?
Yes, this already went to the BOPA.
It already went to the BOPA?
Yes.
Okay. I
Oh,
forgot.
okay.
You're right. Okay.
Was that just this past Monday, this past meeting?
No, this
Already said-
was
said-
the Monday,
Were there any
was the one in
recommendations
March.
from any of the board members?
yes, there were. So when this went to BOPA, one of the biggest differences, and correct me, Tony, if I'm wrong, Tony's on the BOPA, as you know. One of the biggest differences was when the presentation was first made, staff was recommending that it not be allowed in CC1 at all. So the BOPA felt that if it was not visible from the road, or if you were going to put it behind some type of an enclosure, that it should be allowed within CC1. So the BOPA felt that that should also include the CRA, that if it's a CC1 property within the CRA, that it still should be allowed to have a container if it's not visible from the road or it is enclosed. So one of the things that, in talking about it, I said, okay, I didn't have a problem with CC1 or any of the industrial, but told them I would still recommend that it not be allowed in the CRA within our redevelopment district. And the reason being is that just because it's enclosed doesn't mean that it's aesthetically pleasing. You could have, for example, we have Crystal, which, is coming into our city. So you could have, if you allow it on CC1 within the corridor, you could have Crystal have 2 or 3 of these things, theoretically, that are enclosed by these big masonry structures. So if that's the pleasure of the commission, then that's fine. Staff felt that it would not, that wouldn't be a pleasing vision coming into our city. So the only difference between what BOPA recommended and what staff is now recommending is that it not be allowed within the CRA.
All right, and to go with your example there, I know it's just an example, but I know that here in the ordinance, it does say that it can't be placed on off-street parking. Does that mean parking that is owned by, for instance, in this example, Crystals, all of that parking, would that be considered?
Right, they wouldn't be able to take up parking spaces because with most properties, the parking spaces that they have been calculated to meet the need of that use. So when you come and you start putting structures and eliminating parking, you're in essence possibly creating a situation where now they don't meet the code with regard to parking.
But you think with these rules in place, they would still have enough room somewhere on their property after abiding by all of the rules, putting it in the back, all of those things, keeping it hidden, that they would somehow still be able to meet all those requirements in that specific instance?
With regard,
Case-by-case basis.
And I know it's a case-by-case basis, but the reason I'm asking is because I think of the property and I can't think of how there would be enough room to fit several of them on there. And I just caution, I slow down when I think of maybe the unintended consequences. When we are trying to attract businesses, I'd rather have more tools in the toolbox if someone needs in the CRA behind their business. There's a lot of other properties that we wouldn't be able to see at all from the road. And I don't necessarily want to say this is completely off limits. It's not even, we can't even discuss this, because if they need extra storage and that gets them to come in, and if it's, and I would think that the majority of businesses along US 1 that I can think of would be in the back. And as long as they meet these requirements that say that it has to be, you can't see it from the road, It has to be behind the front plane, has to meet all these requirements. I would side more on letting it being allowed there. With that being said, so the commission doesn't take me wrong, I think we do need something on the books that takes a look at this. And one thing that I am against is allowing it in residential. And I think we'll probably all agree on that. One other thing I want to look at is, and maybe you can speak to this, of why we wouldn't allow it in the B designation. And if we already have some that you might know of in the B zoning, because remember, as we started this off, we don't have any complaints about these things. I don't know if anyone has received a complaint about a storage unit. I haven't, staff hasn't. So that's why I'm being cautious here, and I want to know the whole story of what about the B? If you could talk about the B designation.
Sure, our zoning ordinance is designed so that we go, when it comes to commercial type activity, we go from very low intense, think of a coffee shop or a bookstore, something of that nature, where it's very quiet, to more intense, all the way up to a cement processing type of facility. So we start with B1, and we go B2, 3, 4, 5, B6, and then we have CC1, and then we have I1 and I2. So B1 being the least intense of our zoning, of our commercial districts, and I2 being the most intense. So when we look at what other jurisdictions are doing, they're restricting these to the most intense business type activities, the industrial or what they call heavy business use. For example, in South Daytona, they call it their heavy business district. They are industrial in nature, so they're really not something that staff feels would be appropriate to have in a B1, B2, B3. You wouldn't want this sitting next to a potential coffee shop or something that is a quiet, non-intense use. So that's the reasoning for that.
Well, and I think too that it's good to look to the other cities on what they are doing, but I don't think that necessarily we have to be just like them, and we have our own needs. And my question would be more to, in one of these, I can't remember which line, it makes sure that these aren't, out front. They're not seen. I would like to think of them in the back. And I know that a lot of B designation doesn't have much room in the back.
Right.
There may be some properties, and that's what I'm unsure of. But in your case, if a book company wanted to come in, a bookstore, that's great, and they have a B zoning, and there's enough room in the back, I wouldn't mind them allowing them having storage for extra books in the back. If it's in the back, it's not seen. It just doesn't jump out to me as terrible. But I do know that the main reason we're probably looking at doing this, I don't believe it's safety, correct? It's not about hurricanes or any of that. I think it's more about being visually appealing, correct?
Right, that is the majority of it. For example, a lot of the B-type zonings that we have are designed to mix in more so with our residential. So you have some B zonings that are surrounded by residential. So the fact that you put it in the back of a B zone property, now it's visible from the homeowners in their backyard. So that's another reason
point.
why, when you have the less intense zoning, the less intense commercial uses are usually more integrated into the neighborhood and residential areas.
Very valid point.
So
Yeah.
that's
Great
part of
point.
it. It's not just what the other jurisdictions are doing. And the only reason why I mention that is to kind of give perspective, not to say that we have to do what they're doing, but just to give the fact that what we are doing is not out of place. It's not unusual.
Right. No, that's a very valid point. I know, Vice Mayor, you've been waiting patiently.
Al, can you pull up the ordinance?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if we could see, because from what I recall, It's not allowed, it's allowed in the CRA, but not allowed in the it's allowed in CC1,
Not the overlay.
but not the overlay. That touches LPGA and US 1, correct?
Right.
So there are parts of the CRA that it would be eligible for,
It would be eligible in all parts of the CRA except those properties that abut
okay.
Ridgewood, which we already have some requirements in our CRA that prevent certain properties, that prevent properties from abutting, that abut Ridgewood and LPGA from being able to do.
Okay. And then said something that has to be in the rear, but if it can't be in the rear, it has to be behind an 8-foot wall.
Yes.
The problem is, these things are 8 feet 6 inches tall. So if you put an 8-foot wall around it, you're still gonna see it.
Well, it has a cap, so there's a, I
But
think.
my point is, I would rather, I agree that a container ship that was just taken off of a ship and plunked into our city has no business on US 1. It could go in the industrial, state Carswell, that's where I would expect to see it. I think we would all agree. However, if we're gonna squeeze these in somewhere, I personally would rather not see an 8-foot concrete block wall surrounding this thing. I would rather us say that if you're gonna use it in one of these areas, it must be skinned with a hardy board type material or board and batten type material to make it less egregious, because now you've got this rusty steel thing inside this prison wall, and everyone knows what's back there. But if you look at this, there's no difference in my opinion, and at first thought, I agree with you on not in residential. But we're talking about something that's 320 square feet. It's 40 feet long, it's 8 feet wide.
No, it's 20 foot long.
What's that?
They're 20 feet long.
Some of them are 40.
Huh?
Some of them are 40
Yeah,
feet.
but very seldom you see the 40 foot.
But, so let's say 20, it's 160 square feet. What's the difference between that and my backyard if we made them skin it and go into Home Depot and buy in a Ted shed and plunk it in my backyard? It's the same thing.
That's my question.
These things are affordable. They're less than $2,000 for a 20-foot long one. They're $3,000 for a 40-foot long one. They look like crap when they just come off the boat, but the reason people buy them is because they're cheap and they're bulletproof. And if we were to treat these as accessory structures, as we do a Ted shed, but make it aesthetically appealing instead of trying to hide it behind some monstrosity of a wall, I think that's more aesthetically pleasing in my mind. I don't know where we get to the decoration design committee and what is good taste and not good taste, but when you're trying to hide an elephant, everyone knows there's an elephant behind that wall, you know, so I'm having a little heartburn with that. Let's hide it behind this thing and no one will know it's there when we all know it's there. And if we made it look better, we would want to know it's there. And we could be on the cutting edge as using this storage shed as a construction type. It has to meet all the other codes, it has to be tied down for hurricane restraints, but I don't really see any difference between this and a Ted shed if you made it look good.
Yes, sir.
Well, you tapped into what I was thinking, the same thing. It was two things I was thinking. One was on the CRA, if it was already here within the last year or something, I don't know if there's any point in case in that. I know you mentioned Phyllis down there. But in her case, you don't even know it's there. And like you're saying, it's no different than a shed. One thing we could put in there is it has to be the same color as the exterior so that it all blends in, so you don't even know it's there. Because it is the same thing, it's just an affordable way of storage.
Are you talking about Heavenly Cheesecake? How
Yeah.
it's pink?
Yeah.
It blends right in.
Yeah, but like you say, I was thinking the same thing, it's no different than a shed to a certain extent, except it's kind of just, looks like a built-on room if it's, does it have to be away from it? Is that part of the ordinance, or can it be like, on the building itself?
There's typically, for fire reasons, a 5-foot separation.
Oh, it has to be separate?
But if you're gonna spend all that money to build an 8-foot wall concrete, you could side it with hardy board siding and stucco it and make it look exactly like you're building, cheaper than you can build a masonry wall.
And paint it the same color as the building? So you wouldn't even know it's there.
Commissioner Johnson has a question.
I deal with a lot of them. We have like 14 of them in one spot we use, but the way I feel like it should be, that it should be at least a certain distance from the commercial building wall, and it should be the same color as that commercial building. And I think it's a good idea that he has to put like a panel board or hardy board or something around it, which would, then we would have to figure out what we're gonna do with the top of it. You're gonna have to put a roof on it, a metal roof or shingle type roof, or what, if you put that on it, it can't have just the board around it and a flat roof unless you have something built on top of it. And then another thing we gotta be careful of as well too is, there's a lot of heavy commercial places that's grandfathered into residential areas that already have these things. So if we say we're not going to allow them in any residential area, what do we do with some places that's grandfathered in, big business, big industrial businesses that already have some of these in place? And
wouldn't be residential,
they're
though.
grandfathered in.
Well, they would be
In
within that 1 year.
residential area. If they was to move out, then nobody else could move in.
Yeah, they
They'd
would
be
be
within the
within the
1 year.
one-year timeframe.
Right. They'd be within the 1 year time frame. So if they,
He said none in a residential area though.
well, none new. You wouldn't be able to have any now come in
But
and
you're
go
still
into
gonna allow them to
residential
have
areas.
Ones that's already there in a residential area.
Residential is not gonna be a heavy industry, though. You're just saying heavy
Believe me,
industry.
It is. Some of it is.
In a residential?
There's some heavy commercial buildings that's in residential areas.
Smokey's building?
They're grandfathered in. If they was to move out, nothing else could go in there. It would go all residential, some of the places.
Roy, you're talking about a Smokey's building, right?
Well, some of them.
Yeah.
I'm not pointing fingers at anything. And then there's some that.
I mean, we
just have
could
to be
have,
careful how we do it, but I think that would be a good idea. If it was painted the same color as the building, it'd blend right in, rather than just put a concrete wall around it. I mean, that's like, say, well, we got another dumpster in there, right?
Are you aware of any other cities that do that? Maybe don't require a wall, but maybe siding, like Vice Mayor Penny was talking about?
I'm not. Some cities I spoke to said that they wouldn't, either, it ranged from, we're not allowing them at all, to, we allow them in heavy business and industrial areas with an enclosure. I'm not aware of any that have any other architectural requirements, but that is something that, I don't know what would be entailed in putting hardy board or some type of material on it. I suppose you could stucco it.
When does it become taxable, property tax?
I'm not sure that if we were to place it on a property where it's being used for storage, if that would affect.
That's temporary, but if somebody builds a shed on their property, that's generally,
Is
I
that
think that's
taxed?
taxable. That's a-
Right.
so at what point, if it's the temporary storage container, it's a temporary container, but once we start to enclose it and put hardy board and a roof on it, now it's
Well,
a accessory structure.
It would get permitted. That's
Permitted,
what, yes.
right.
And then the property appraiser is
Yeah.
made aware of all of the permits that we issue.
He'd come out and he
That's
would
how they-
assess that
And
as
then they would
taxable.
assess it. Right. So, I mean, that's something that we could work into the code, whatever.
We're trying to get ahead of what we think is becoming an issue. And there are some, I understand what you're saying, that there are some businesses that may need to have one of these, and we want to be business-friendly to accommodate them. But then you get the other side of the argument, where you get a business that says, well, I don't want to move there because they have these things, and I don't want to be a business next to that. So it's not it's never an easy, good argument. There's always a counter-argument, which makes it difficult. But
Welcome
we're
to
trying to
politics.
head off what perceives to be, more recently, people getting these containers out of convenience to use on their properties because they're moving onto a property that doesn't really suit their needs, or it's too small, or it's, whatever have you. But I always, we think in things of extremes. So I always envision, well, what if we had every business on US 1 had one of these containers in front of it? It's possible, not likely, but it's possible. So I always try to head that off, and that's the extreme way of thinking. Right now on US 1, there's very few that I can recall that have the containers. Now, off of US 1, there are quite a few that are popping up. And we're just trying to control it as it's coming in.
So, if someone came in tomorrow and put one out in front of their business on US 1, since they're not allowed, since we're an inclusive policy right now, so.
You know, we've talked about Heavenly Cheesecake, but there's also a couple that are behind it's called the Dock,
Daytona Outreach Center.
thank you. Behind
Good
there,
shot, yeah.
they've got a couple, which is by 618 Ridgewood, used to be,
Yeah,
Yep.
whatever that was,
used to be one of those other pizza places.
New York Pizza.
Yeah, New York Pizza.
There's one behind the trailer, Best Price Trailers.
Okay,
Can't see it from the road.
yeah. So there are some that are creeping in, and we need to control it before it gets to the point where there's so many and then it becomes too late. So right now, I would say it's not a problem. We're trying to avoid it becoming a problem.
Right, and I appreciate you looking down the line like that. I have one more question before, Vice Mayor. So in the instance of Heavenly Cheesecake, if it was there prior to a year, then they don't have to get a permit? Or as I read it, it says they still have to come in and get a permit even if it's been there 6 years, right?
Yes, if it's been there for more than a year, but they never got a permit, then in order to officialize this and have the city go through the process and have the city give it its blessing, if you will, they would come in and they would pull a permit for it.
So how will they meet the requirement that's in there to get the permit that says that it can't be a property abutting Ridgewood?
They wouldn't need to meet that. They would, because they've been there for at least a year, the getting the permit would simply be officializing and saying, okay, you have this legitimate structure, you're in essence grandfathered in. There would never be a question in the future as to, well, was a permit gotten for this, and how did that happen? They
So
would
it's
be able
just
to come
checking
in,
off
there
the
would be
box.
there'd be a permit, an official approved permit in city records.
Okay. Vice Mayor? you have a
Well,
question?
to that point, I understand that would be the process if it was used for storage, but what if it was used for space, like livable space? Then it would have to meet all the life safety standards, correct?
Yes. That's,
Yeah, but we said that you couldn't run electric to it, you couldn't run,
Right, but don't you think there probably might be some electric and stuff over in those? What are you gonna, my whole thing is, and I understand what we're trying to do, is to get ahead of the crappy rusty container ships being dropped on our main street, right? But I don't want to cut our nose to spite off our face. I want to embrace the type of container projects in Tampa Bay.
well, that's a different scenario.
right.
No, I know, but from what I'm saying is that if at Cottage Row, we decided we needed a place to store our lawn equipment, because I'm going to cut the lawn there every week, I wouldn't be allowed to put one there because it's on US 1, but if I put it in the back corner up in the grass and I skinned it with vinyl siding or hardy board, you couldn't tell the difference between that building and the buildings that are already there.
Right.
That's what I don't want to do, is to, I know we don't want to discourage people from moving in because they don't want to move in next to crap,
Right.
but I don't want to make it so restrictive that we can't attract some trend-setting people that want to do some trend-setting stuff in our community. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, but what you just described is not trend setting. Putting in a storage container for your lawnmower equipment is not trend setting. If you want to talk about the container buildings that have glass fronts and are
Right.
livable, that's a separate issue. That is a building design that would be permissible under the building code. We're talking, see, these are storage containers that you see up there on the.
No, and I get it, but
That's not what we're talking about. So don't confuse that with these restrictions.
Talking about shipping containers, not storage containers.
But-
These are shipping containers, but they're
Then
reconfigured to
buildings.
become
Building.
livable structures.
no, and I get it, but Heavenly Cheesecake doesn't look anything like that.
No, and she's got shipping containers.
I know, but she's going to have crap on US 1. That's been there for 30 years.
Well, like I said, we can't go back and fix what's been there for so many years. You can decide what you want to do. You can draw a line and say, all right, effective from the second reading of this, moving forward. What we tried to do is say, let's go back a year or two and say, from that point, we'll.
No, that's fair. I think that's fair.
I mean, if you don't want to touch anything that's been around for more than 2 years, All right, shame on us, we didn't do it sooner.
But what I would like to know is, if you've had a container for a year or more, you're going to be able to come in and get a permit. Why wouldn't we want them to aesthetically meet the same requirements that whatever our code ends up being from this? Why wouldn't we have them meet those same aesthetic requirements?
We can require that. The reason why that's not something that was considered was because we're kind of giving a grandfathering, if you will, giving a break to folks who came in, and for more than a year, the city hasn't said anything. They came in, they put it down, nobody approached them and said, hey, you needed a permit. Code enforcement never went by and said, you know, you need to move this, or you're not meeting the setbacks. So that would be the argument that folks would make. It's been here for 2, 3, 4 years.
And I
I've
don't
been
have
doing
a
this, and you
problem
haven't said
giving
anything.
them time,
Yeah.
but if we are trying to make sure aesthetically we're improving our city,
Right.
we have a half a dozen, I don't know how many we have, but I'm just going to throw that number out there. We have a half a dozen that are going to grandfather in. Why would we allow those to remain a rusty old shipping container that came off of a ship and require others in the same area to improve aesthetically so that it is something that we can accept and embrace? I just have a problem
we're
with
trying
still
to-
seeing all those other grandfathered in shipping
Well, we were
containers.
trying to soften what the mayor's argument is.
And again,
It's
I
been there
don't,
forever, why are you gonna bug them now?
I don't have a problem with giving them time to do it, but I still think that requirement needs to be made or else we're just gonna have, again, a half a dozen shipping containers, or however many it is, still sitting around, looking rusty, you know, something that we don't want. So that's where, if we give them time to accomplish those things, because they shouldn't have it now anyway.
Right.
Period. So my point is, we're going to say, we're going to give you 6 months, a year, whatever, to come up to code and permit you, and you can keep it. And that would go for whatever areas, like the, you know,
And
that they normally, I assume, wouldn't be able to get a permit, but because they've had it for a year or more, they would be able to get a permit. So I think they should still be held to that aesthetic standard, given time, soften the blow. But I think that standard should still be intact.
Well, and if they're in the CRA, which is what I think we're all most concerned about, we're not really concerned about State and Carswell, right? If they're on our main street, then give them a time limit and pay for half of it as a CRA
Do it as a
grant.
grant. I don't have a problem with that either.
Can't be that many on.
But what I want is, if it's going to be aesthetically pleasing to have those in our city, don't have a problem with it. I want them all to be aesthetically pleasing. I'm willing to talk about grants. I'm willing to talk about time. I don't have a problem with any of that. But I think we need to maintain, because in this city, historically, things were grandfathered in, and it was just let go. Because it was grandfathered in, oh, we're not going to mess with them. But that doesn't accomplish our entire goal.
No, you're absolutely right. Grandfathering means
Yeah.
you're permitted, but typically grandfathering comes with a termination date.
Right.
I don't think we've ever done that, have we?
We did that with the outside displays,
Yeah.
but typically when you grandfather something in, it means you can keep it for the next 10 years, and then after that, it's got to go.
Right.
Well, our code, our termination is if the use or whatever it is, whatever activity that is associated with that grandfathered activity or structure ceases for 6 months, then you lose the
Right.
grandfather.
Right.
So
But
it could be an activity, or it could be a
I
structure.
really believe that requirement should still stay there. Given leniency, given grants, whatever, we still need to accomplish that. That's my feeling on it. I don't have a problem with them being there.
And I hear what you're saying. I think that I disagree. Are there particular properties that you don't believe are appealing, these actual,
I'm not,
especially along US 1?
I'm not trying to say I've gone out and I've complained and because they're there, we just really, I don't really pay much of attention to them. But if we're going to begin making them aesthetically pleasing and accepting them and permitting them and all of that, why wouldn't we still grandfather? You still have to be aesthetically pleasing.
And I hear what you're saying, but my point is, if we don't know they're there, they're not aesthetically jumping out at us as a problem. And the ones that I know, honestly, are either they look good, they look fine, or, and I don't know of any bad ones. And so what I don't want to do is put a burden on, let's take, for instance, Heavenly Cheesecake, for example. It blends in. I think 99.99999% of people probably don't even know it exists. You have to drive to see it and really look for it. And if she now has to build all these extra things, I know that, she was looking to sell her business, right? And so now it's government coming in and going, hey, you know what? Now you got to build a block wall. I don't know how much block wall is, $5,000.
No, I'm not talking about, I don't even like the wall.
So now we run the risk of putting that burden on a business, and there's the potential of her going out of business because we're places.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm not talking about the wall. I don't even like that idea.
Mayor, can't we just have them just paint it?
I'm talking about the container
okay with painting.
itself.
So
What I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
if it's a
And
rusty
so-
old container, we tell them they gotta paint it so it looks like, the same as the code enforcement, we give them a code enforcement if their house was falling apart or looking bad or had mildew.
Well, and to be honest, I think that we all have ideas, and actually, I don't believe we're going to come to consensus in the next 9 minutes, and we still have a presentation that we may not be able to get to. And this commission, we don't like to kick this can down the road, but in all honesty, Mr. Forte, I think we're going to need some more time to think on this and
What
to
I'd
all
like
come
to
back.
ask, Mayor, is if each of you will look at that ordinance, mark it up, mark up what your concerns are, or even recommended change, and get it back to me. And then Brian and I will look at it and see what kind of looks like consensus among you, and we'll try to redraft it and see if we can build consensus off of what your thoughts are.
Okay.
Well,
That's fair.
Yeah, Vice Mayor.
I do agree with Commissioner Curry that I've heard the term legal nonconforming. And 25 years ago, there was a strip club 100 yards from where my office is, and it went out of business,
That was a bikini bar, it was not a strip club.
allegedly. And
And you know that, Hal?
And I know everyone was sitting around with bated breath, waiting for that time to go, because if someone had bought it in 5 months and opened it up, it would have been there forever. And car lots that are the size of a postage stamp that are there forever aren't really what we want to see, but it's what we have. And if we don't have some type of time frame, and I hear what you're saying, you don't want to hurt the business, but where the regular grant is 50-50, maybe you make this grant 75-25. I'd rather encourage them with a carrot than beat them with the stick.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, there can't be a half a dozen, like you said, and it can't cost this city
Well, then,
$100,000.
then could we do 100%?
We could do it, I don't care.
Burden on them.
I want them to have some skin in the game. They gotta have
They
something.
need to have a little
But-
skin in the game.
but if
I
they-
mean, they've had a container that shouldn't have been there all along.
But we
realistically.
never told them.
But we never told them.
But if the whole goal is to improve the corridor and improve the aesthetics, and rather than whack them over the head, say, listen, we want to come in and we want to fix that thing so you can't tell. It's going to be painted the same. You pay for the paint and we'll pay for the stucco, something like that. But they have to have a little skin in the game. Otherwise, they're not going to take care of it. But I'm not opposed, because it can't be that much money to address the ones on the corridor and move forward. I know there'll be another workshop on it, but that would be my suggestion. Is
No, and I
You have
appreciate
to do
all of your
something.
thoughts, and I sincerely came with a different mindset, and so it's good that we talk these things out, and I think that Mr. Forte's recommendation that we all take a look at this, get with him individually, and let him know what we would like to see, and then that way, staff is more prepared for what our stances are. We can come to the table and we can hopefully make something work out that we can all come to consensus on. So I think that's as far as we're going to get on this one tonight. I appreciate, do you have anything further to add to that, or any questions
No,
for us,
it
Mr.?
Sounds like a good idea, and so you're talking within the corridor on ones that would be visible, not ones that would be behind a building.
I think we're talking
Note all that too.
about a lot of that.
Yeah.
Because we've
So-
put in the trees, we've done the undergrounding, we've done so much to beautify the corridor, so,
Just remember, if it's not visible from the road, especially on US 1, it's visible from the residential property.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody sees it.
Not to pick on Heavenly Cheesecake, you don't see it when you go on US 1, but turn down the side street, and it's,
Yeah, you can see it if you turn.
Hey,
Yeah.
I turned that side.
I know, so.
All right,
And
thank you,
one
Mr.
thing-
Walker.
Mayor, the one thing about this commission is that we don't kick the can, but we don't rush into things either, so.
Yeah.
We make sure we thoroughly figure this stuff out, I gotta tell you, so.
I appreciate that. We have 5
Well,
minutes.
city
I'm
attorney,
sure the presentation is longer.
This presentation longer than that, and what I'd like to do, because I have 3 other things to talk about. So the commission meeting, I think, I don't want to jinx it, should go rather quickly. So,
So is.
so if we
You
could
just jinx
reconvene
it.
the work session after the meeting, I'd like to do that if you could.
Okay.
Valerie said as long as we're home by 9 o'clock.
You,
Well, are we going to do the
This is us. There's only
presentation and
three
your
more.
3 issues?
Yeah, the presentation will go relatively
Okay.
quick.
Two other things.
It may take 10 or 15 minutes.
Sorry.
10, 15 minutes?
Dallas baseball.
I'll tell him I said it.
Okay, all
If we can
right.
do that in 10
Well,
minutes.
Then,
my
yeah, we
other
have 4
item-
minutes till our commission meeting, so let's go ahead and we will adjourn this and reconvene after the city commission meeting.
Okay.
Do I need to say anything legal more than that, Mr. Simpson? Nope. All right, we're good to go. Is there any objection to that?
No.
Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. All right, thank you very much. We are now reconvening our workshop, May 10th, 2022. It is 7:13, and now we're going to call up Mrs. Gurney. Come on up, and you have a presentation for us.
And I will go through
An
it.
expedited
Thank you.
presentation?
I will go
Thank you
through
very
it
much.
quickly. I have a lot of screen prints, but I'll just fly through it.
Not that we don't want to see your
Well,
presentation.
no, but I know all of you are going to go sign up for the customer portal that's available, and you'll be able to see it. So there should be a slide right before, a couple before that. Yeah, right there. Yeah, you can go past. Yep, we're good. First, I want to give we went live Monday, May the 2nd with utility billing portion of our new system. We were about a week longer than we wanted to be, but I first want to say thank you to the customer service staff. They've worked very hard this entire period, but especially this last month. They were doing manual receipts for a couple of weeks. So when you're used to having the computer, that's kind of tough. But also a big thank you to Scott. He did a phenomenal job. He wasn't even back full-time when he did all the data dumps for this system, so it was great. And a big thank you to Amanda Raslowski, the customer service supervisor. Without her experience and dedication and hard work, we wouldn't be here now. But the improvements on the new system, it has a new customer online portal that adds a lot of functions, which we'll go through briefly. It has real-time updates for the payments that are done through that portal, instead of having a day's delay between when the payment is put in and when it hits the account. Reduces data entry because we used to have to manually re-enter the online payments that we got. Adds reporting and query. Export of data is very easy with this system, and we have integrated mobile technology. The old system had a third party that provided the service orders for the meter readers, and this is integrated with the system now. Go ahead. So this is the new portal page, and on this page, and you can't see it real well on the overhead, but it there's some features that are coming. The Easy Pay is a feature for non-utility billing stuff that'll be coming in the future. Utility billing is one of the options there. And then we have a link to be able to do building permit lien search payments still on the old online payment system. They will eventually be on this new system. And then some of you may use Ion Water. If not, we're going to talk about it again in just a minute more. Go ahead to the next one. This is the core of the utility portal. When you click that utility billing link on that first page, it gives you several options. You can do a quick pay on your bill, which means you don't have to have an account and actually log into it. You can just go in with your account number, and I think you do need your last payment amount, and do a payment to your account. Or you can log into the account, and if you log into the account, then you'll be able to do payments, look at your transaction history, look at address information, account information, consumption. You can pay if you have multiple accounts, like some of you may pay for retiree medical. Eventually, we're going to have online. You can set that up to pay
Oh, so
your
you'll be able to
retiree
do that
medical
too?
and your utility billing on this online portal.
Okay.
Portal. So that's
So no more confusion.
right. When we get that portion up there, but utility billing is already there. And it'll save your credit card information or your payment information. So a business can, if you have multiple accounts for a business, you'll be able to do that. Coming, which we'll talk more about in a second, there will be service requests also on this portal. Go ahead. The next screen, if you had selected utility billing, it would ask you to either log on or register, and we'll just go ahead and flip through the next one. This is an example I set up myself as the city payment portal, and I set 3 accounts, so you can see how you can see multiple accounts. And like I said, eventually we'll have service requests out there. Go ahead to the next one. On the payment portal homepage there, you can pay now, or you can schedule to pay, or you can roll in auto pay, are some of the options. Go ahead. When you manage your accounts, you can select new accounts and add to your portal, or you can remove accounts. And then once you have them selected, if you click on you can't really see here, but the account number there is underlined. If you click on them, then they'll drill down and give you more information. Go ahead. And that more information, across the top, you'll see several tabs, and that's all the information now on the utility accounts. So this first page has your balances and what's been paid, and has your most recent bill. And if you click on where it says View Bill, go ahead to the next page. This is the new bill. You'll be able to see it right there online. And it's got the consumption graph on the bill, and of course all the charges broke down. I do want to mention while we're there, you see the barcode. Our old bill did have barcodes too, but this one we're really going to be able to put to use. We have scanners that have not quite been programmed yet, but they will be, so that the cashiers will be able to scan the bills, and it'll pull up the account and what the payment amount is supposed to be, and then they just enter, is it the right payment amount, and enter on through. So it'll speed up data entry for them. Go ahead to the next page. One of the other options is a transaction history, and then we have loaded a year's worth of transactions, so you still do have information about your old account and bill up there, at least on a summary basis. Go ahead. And then this is the information about the account that shows you what your meter services are and your non-meter services. Go ahead. And then on the account information screen, it's going to ask you to please put in a phone number. You don't have to, but we encourage and try to collect those, because we can send out automated notifications with the phone numbers. Okay, and that's just showing, putting in a phone number, and you would update it. And then on the consumption history screen, it's going to show a year's worth of, or 2 years worth of consumption, and you can see the comparison there. So if your consumption goes up and spikes like this city account did at Riverside, You'll be able to easily identify it on the graph. Go ahead. And then if we haven't done any notifications yet with the system, but if we had any notifications that have been sent out, right now we're set up to do the past due notifications. It would list them here, but we'll have other notifications that you can do. And then the next screen just shows where you can update the account numbers on the all of the accounts that I had signed up, multiple accounts, and then you can sign up for reminders. Go ahead. And this is signing up for email reminders. It'll email you when you've done a payment, when a payment's been updated, or a bank draft, or if a payment was declined, or if your credit card's expiring. And you can just flip through two because that was the second page of that. Get myself caught up to the page here. And then it also has a spot under the Contact Us where you can send an email message to customer service. This was my actual test of customer service. I sent them an email and said, please confirm you got this email. And actually within 10 minutes, of course it was the supervisor, so she was paying close attention, I got a phone call that says, I got your email. So this is live and it works. On this same page, there's also information about the phone number for customer service is on the right-hand side of the screen. And then the Easy Pay, we don't have set up. That's not for utility accounts. That's for other type accounts, but that will be coming. The Quick Pay is set up, though. That's the one-time payment. And then the phone payments are that 833 number. We have our own phone payments that will then automatically update to our system. And that's all on that one. And then this is just a screenshot of when you go in and submit a payment. I actually went through to make sure it was working after we were live and put a dollar payment on one of the city accounts. And it did go through and sent me the email of the receipt. And then the next one shows you how the receipt looks on the portal, but it will also, if you have your email set up, email the receipt to you. Then if you remember back on the first page of the portal, it had the Eye on Water link. If you've not signed up for this service, it is available for all of our electronic read meters. So you can sign up for it and go ahead and flip to the next page.
I usually use that when I have company to see how much my water is going up.
Yeah. So this is the screenshot of that page, that Eye on Water. This is actually by our Badger Meter Company. So this is a link to them, the electronic meters. It will actually, you can change the criteria and go down to hourly. So if you had a leak and you couldn't quite figure out what was going on, if you changed it to hourly and you found out it was in certain hours, you might be able to narrow down where the leak was. And it has a lot of other information. It tells you what's been done the last 7 days and what has been done in history. So there's a wealth of information about your meter in there. Go ahead. Actually, that's a repeat slide I didn't catch. Go ahead past it. This is, I know this is not fun really for you guys, but us accountants, we love Excel, and this is an Excel type grid that this system has. This is for the customer service people. What I just want to show you here is that, and we'll go ahead and flip to the next one, is all the different selection and filtering criteria that this has. It has, you can say contain, start with, does not have. So it really allows them to, if somebody doesn't remember something, they're calling and want to know about something on Daytona Avenue, but they don't quite remember the address, they can put Daytona in there and it'll pick them all up. The other beauty of this is the data export. You can actually, when you're on the grid, right-click and take it over to Excel, or PDF, or a couple of other formats. So I know that doesn't really excite the customer, but it excites us in the back office, so to speak. And the next screen is just the screen that I'm showing you that there's a lot of selection criteria for the cashiers so they can look things up. This is their selection screen. And then the next one wanted to talk about the things that are coming in utility billing. You'll be able to do service requests through the portal. You'll be able to actually ask for your account to be disconnected through the portal if you're moving or going, away for the summer or winter or whatever. Eventually, we'll have additional notifications that we can do. Right now, we have past due notifications, but we could put out boil water or some kind of emergency notification using the system. And then the online payments are going to expand. We will eventually have the medical billing on there and the other miscellaneous AR. Then rentals and liens, and then eventually, as the other subsystems come on, we'll have occupational license, building permits, code enforcement. Those will all be added.
Great.
Good.
And
Sorry, go on.
yeah, and then the last thing is kind of give you a look future. Right now, the financial modules are scheduled to go live towards the end of June. I will go ahead and say that we are running into some problems with payroll. Our payroll is very complex, the number of different codes that we use. So I'm a little hesitant to say we're going to actually make the end of June, but we will strive to do that. And then there's a couple of other financial modules, fixed assets and projects that will be going later in July. And then the My Civic app, I don't know if you guys remember it from our demo, but it's an app for your phone that kind of ties together the, not just customer, but the citizen portal for the city. That we hope to have done by August. That'll bring in a lot of informational things for the citizens. And then the actual web-based timekeeping and scheduling system for payroll won't actually get up and live until November. And then community development and public works work order system following that in January of next year. And that's kind of the short and sweet of it.
Well, I'll tell you, Stella, it's amazing. It's I think, a wish list for us and our citizens for a long time, and it's very impressive to see everything that you already have in there. So thank you so much for your effort and all of your staff that's put in time for this. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you for this. I haven't used it yet. We haven't paid our bill, I guess, since May 2nd. So any citizen from now, from May 2nd on, is going to see that it's this now, right?
Right, and you go
Okay.
onto our webpage, Scott's already updated it, and you click on to pay your bill, and it'll take you to this page.
Okay.
You will need your new account number, which if you have the new bill, it's on it, or customer service can help you get it, and your last payment amount if you're gonna do the quick pay or register.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No more mail?
What? You'll still get mail. You'll still get your bill. Yeah. All right, Mr. Forte, you have 2 items for us.
Yeah, so the next thing, still losing my voice. The next thing I want to talk about is the capital improvements project. And what I was hoping to do, I won't do it tonight, but we'll try to do it once a month, is give you an update overall on all of our capital projects, not just in Public Works, but in other areas of the city. So Susan had put the spreadsheet together, and it's kind of a summary of everything that's going on, working with Antoine and Steve, and it's an update so that we can kind of keep an eye on the progress of what's happening with what's within the budget, so it's a good update. So we'll do that at another day. But what I wanted to address tonight is, we Commission agreed to go ahead and hire ZHA as a consultant to serve as a owner's rep and project manager on a half a dozen or more projects. And we got a proposal from them, and they initially tweaked it, and it came down. And we met with them last week, and they gave us a rundown of what they thought their responsibilities would be for those projects. And at the end of the day, even after we removed 3 projects from the list, the cost is still about $600,000 for their services. And I met with one of their reps today, and I trust them. I've known them when I worked in Seminole County, and I trust Andy Brooks, who's the principal for ZHA. And they're even working on trying to figure out what's the value of what we're paying for. And even when we met internally, there's some things that we can do that we don't really need them for. So my biggest concern going into this was that the staff, Antoine and Steve and Sean, we just don't have time to carry out some of these projects. Well, a new issue has come up. Last week, a flurry of emails came out from the other city managers because their projects have been increasing double digits, doubling, and in one case, a project tripled. The cost of projects is just skyrocketing. We're seeing it locally, even with Pictona. My biweekly meetings over there is met with nothing but price increases. So I think what I want to recommend is that we unwind this clock a little bit, and we either put ZHA on hold, or we eliminate moving any tasks to them, and we look to do things in-house again, potentially even hiring a project manager to work under Antoine and Steve to help carry these out. I think we need to reprioritize these things, because one of the things that I think is happening is the money that we have allocated for each of these projects, I no longer think is enough. I think we're going to be under budget on a lot of it. The biggest priority that I think we have right now is the trifecta of building the Public Works building, building the new fire station, and renovating the old fire station. They kind of work hand in hand to get that done, and I think that would be one of the priorities, as well as some of the water line replacements. But today we had a bid opening for the Public Works building, and although there were over 30 plans picked up, we didn't get one bid back.
Oh, my God, no.
Wow.
So remember, we had this problem several years ago where we weren't getting bids back, and that's what happened today. And I think it's primarily because of the amount of money that we had budgeted that these contractors don't think is enough. Another question came up as to whether or not the concrete slab is going to be sufficient for the building to go on it, but that's got a solution to it. We can figure that out and get an architect and an engineer to determine that. But when you put a bid out and 30 companies, now some of those companies have no business picking up a bid, but they
Right.
did. But still, we didn't get a single bid back on that. So that's concerning to me. So a lot of cities are pushing off their capital projects now, waiting for the market to settle down a little bit, which really kind of upsets me, because this is where we have the money to do the projects, and now the economy's making it difficult so that we almost can't. So without any objection from any of you, I think I want to at least ask ZHA to take a step back, let us reorganize what our priorities are, let us look internally as to what we can or can't do, and whether or not it would be more cost-effective to bring someone on to help as a project manager. We're bringing on the purchasing agent next week, which I think will also be helpful in this whole process. So that's kind of what my recommendation is. Antoine, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that? No. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, and I don't think you're going to get an objection here. Is there any objection?
No.
I also think that we may need to look to take it inward, because you look at 600,000 for that, when we could maybe pay 10 times less and have someone 40 hours a week.
My main focus was not to overburden the staff.
Right.
The current staff has a lot on their plate. When you look at this list of projects that's currently going on, there's a lot on the plate.
Right.
And I don't want to add any more to the plate, but if we could rearrange it and maybe get some help in there, I think we could still be successful.
Yeah. All right. Well, we look forward to the report back on how we're going to work that one out.
The second thing I wanted to talk about is we're moving forward as Pictona 2 continues to move on. They have hired a tournament coordinator who's going to schedule out tournaments, and they're already scheduling. They start in October of this year, and they're booking into 2023 and going beyond. So they've got that part handled. Then we have our side of that equation where we have to start to fill that venue up with other events and performances and activities. And I met with a couple of promoters. I met with Al Smith and I met with Rick Hamilton. A lot of you know Al Smith. Some of you may or may not know Rick Hamilton. Rick used to run the Ocean Center. And Rick is very enthusiastic about it. He was out of state. He now lives in Margaritaville. He moved into town, and he actually reached out to me when all this was happening several months ago, and I met with him several times, and he's offered me a proposal to do this. And I'd like to negotiate this proposal with him and hire him as a consultant to get these things started. And his initial fee would be $2,000 a month for the next 5 months, so you're looking at $10,000. And then after that, in November, he'd go to $3,000 a month, and he'd put in about 20 hours a week. But when you look at the things we're talking about, he wants to help us bring in performances like concerts, country pop, tribute, rock, soul, jazz, Christian, gospel, theater productions, pageants, comedians, social events, vehicle events, trade shows, not yours, Tony, promotions, arts and crafts, festivals, competitive things like cheerleading, dance, drill teams, some sporting events, things like that. We have no expertise on that in-house. We don't even have a rec department. So along with that, then he's got other things that we have to be aware of, things like security, police, emergency services, first aid, ushers, stagehands, ticket production, sales, management, food and beverage services, janitorial services, site management. There's a lot that goes on. Your dad knows, you know. It's over my head. There's no way in the world I can do it. I think this would be a CRA-funded contractual position. And I think if we don't start it now, by the time we get ready in the
behind the
fall
eight
and the
ball.
winter where we should be filling it, it's going to be too late. And another key point is the Ormond Performing Arts Center is closing down for renovations. That's an opportunity for a grab, that we can start to get some performances that typically would take place there. And I think their seating is less than, it's about 600 or 700 over there, I'm not sure. We can grab some of those performances and maybe introduce them to our venue. So I think I'd like to get your consensus to go ahead and work with Rick Hamilton. I don't know if any of you know Rick Hamilton.
No.
I've asked a few people to, give me a reason not to work with him, and nobody can. I did speak to your dad. I guess I'll call him, I did speak to Roland Villa, who's familiar with him, and he had a lot of positive remarks to say about him. I did speak with Big John about him, because Big John was instrumental back in the day with the Ocean Center and had a lot of good things to say about him. I spoke with the fellow from Daytona Beach, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, who does the promotions down in Daytona, who had excellent things to say. So I think Rick would be able to bring us in the back door, and all of a sudden, we would have a successful venue without people realizing
Day
we just
one.
did it.
Yeah, on day one. Yeah.
On day one,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden they go, what the heck just happened? Holly Hill just got all these
Yeah.
events and activities, and nobody started coming.
Yeah.
Mayor,
And
I would
that's-
definitely support that.
Yeah. Is there any objection to that?
What time, how long of a,
We want to,
you want to sign them up for?
Forever.
it's
Well,
basically.
five months
Well,
at two-
he only wants to do this for about 3 or 4 years. He's an older gentleman.
Right.
This would be initially from June to October for the $2,000 a month, and then from October on, there's a 30-day termination clause for either party. I'm going to have Scott review it, because there's also language in here about reimbursable expenses, and we want to be sure we define exactly what that is. Not that I'm paying $2,000 a month and $10,000 for reimbursable expenses.
Right.
So we got to make sure we know what we're talking about. And the other thing, I did speak to Dark over at the Chamber, and she's a an events coordinator.
Yeah.
She's more of a day-of coordinator for weddings.
Yeah.
Things like
Weddings,
that.
yeah.
And I think at some point, we can probably engage her to do certain things over there. But I think we need this. I think we need Rick's expertise.
To get it going and get it
He's
polished.
talking about public relations, social media outlets, developing the website, developing the calendar, the events, a booking mechanism where people can book, creating the licenses for the venue. He knows what he's doing.
And that's something we're lacking and desperately needed.
That's
so-
something that I have wanted since I've been on the commission.
Yeah. So,
For 10 years now.
And if we don't do it and engage now, and we're not ready when the time comes, we're going to be behind, and we're not going to look good. So
Yeah.
I think this would be the right direction to go in.
is there any objection from the commission?
Question, how did your meeting with Al Smith go?
It went well. I met with Al, and it went well. I don't think Al's got interest in this. His enthusiasm wasn't there.
Did he tell you why?
Um,
Did you talk to both of them about the size of the venue and what
Yeah.
entertainment they could bring in?
Yeah, we are not going to, we are a medium to small venue.
Small to medium.
We're not going to bring in the cover bands. We're not going to bring in Alabama and,
Alabama.
isn't that what they bring in down the road here, or whatever they do?
That's where I sold tickets with specs back in the 80s.
Yeah, the tribute bands. Yeah, so we're not even going to get that. We're going to get the one-offs from that. So, Al handles some of the bigger things, and this is almost like too small for him. So, nothing bad to say about Al. He had nothing bad to say about this, but I think the enthusiasm that Rick Hamilton is showing us, I think, is really, because this is all he's going to do. Al's got all that, and Rick's retired, and he wants to help us out and do this.
That's awesome. That's what we need to jumpstart it. So, seeing no objection, you have consensus to move forward with that, Joe, and just update us, keep us up to date on any developments with that.
Okay.
Is there anything further?
That's it for me.
Is there anything further from the commission?
Take your wife wherever you're supposed to be.
Let's go. All right. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.
I don't know